Welcome back to the program. Hope you all had a great weekend. Wanted to start tonight's show with something a little bit different. The Canadian province of Alberta, Canada, has been talking about separating now since this last election in Canada from Canada and is actually wanting to be a completely separate country. So there is a strong separatist movement in Alberta, Canada. By the way, the most conservative province in Canada. And at this point right now, there are referendums, there are bills, legislation. They are going gung-ho because they do not want to be part of the Carney left-leaning, radical extremist open borders government. President Trump's been talking about taking Canada and Canada should be the 51st state and this and that. Well, I've always been very much against that. Because let's face it, do we really want 40 million more votes in our elections? The majority of which, 75, 80%, would all be liberals and leftists? Hell no. Obviously we do not. But if President Trump wants another 51st state, perhaps Alberta, Canada would be a good candidate. Why? Well, for the first thing I can tell you is there's 5 million people in Alberta, Canada. And I can also tell you it is the most conservative, populist, reform type of area in all of Canada. Saskatchewan is right there with it. But Saskatchewan has 1.25 million people. So if he really wants a 51st state, forget the entire country of Canada. Why don't we just bring in Alberta? I wouldn't mind having 5 million more conservative votes in every midterm and general election. But in reality, I'm against all of it because I don't think we should be taking any parts of any other countries or, God forbid, Puerto Rico, which would be an absolute disaster. And why open up Pandora's box? What happens in the future when there's not a Republican or a conservative in charge? And they're like, hey, you remember President Trump? He had that zany idea of, gaining all these different countries and making them our states. Yeah, let's do that. Let's do all of Canada. Let's do all of Puerto Rico. And let's completely destroy the United States of America forever. So honestly, I wish that he would actually tamper down the talk and not say never and troll Carney and everything else. But if for whatever reason the people of Alberta, Canada decide to separate from Canada and they want to join the United States, well, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it. Again, I feel like we're opening up Pandora's box and it's probably not in the best interest of the United States in the long run. But 5 million votes is 5 million votes. So I don't know. I'm torn on that. I'll wait to hear what you folks think about it. So anyway, starting with that, now let's move on. So President Trump has announced that he is signing an executive order that is going to reduce pharmaceutical prices between 30 and 80%, and it should happen immediately within the next 30 days. So this is interesting because the last AutoPen administration raised pharmaceutical drug prices, raised insulin to the point where so many people couldn't even get insulin. And it was, gee, do I take my insulin or do I eat for the week? Okay? Because it was that expensive. And the pharmaceutical industries, they can make pills for 25, 50 cents and charge $1,000 or $1,500 for one pill. So I'm glad that we are doing some type of reining in of big pharma, because, again, they are taking advantage of people. And remember, it's never about solving a problem, right? It's always about treating an illness, but not trying to cure that illness. Because the minute they cure your illness, you're no longer a patient. Meaning what? You no longer are a monthly subscriber to whatever deviant medicine that they came up with that they say that you need. Now, some of them are legitimate, and I understand that. But also, let's think about diet, exercise, lifestyle. All of those things can reduce the dependency on big pharma and pharmaceutical drugs. So it's an interesting thing that he's doing. But if he really wants to do something that would be wonderful, how about sign an executive order that says from now on, starting tomorrow, all ivermectin and all hydroxychloroquine will be available in every single state over the counter and at a decent price. If he wants to do something for a price setting and things like that in pharmaceuticals, why don't you take the good ones that have no side effects that we've all been using for years that the left doesn't want you to use because there's no money in it, right? They'd rather have you have run death is near and put you on a ventilator and masked up and holed up in a hospital and all that with poison death shots. But no, how about ivermectin? How about hydroxychloroquine? These are drugs that have been around to treat malaria. They're antiviral, anti-infection types of drugs. Have been around 50, 60 years with no side effects. None whatsoever. Okay? So if he wants to do something, perhaps maybe that is the next route to go. Okay, so look, I'll be honest, I don't know anything about the Pope. I didn't know anything about the Pope beforehand, after. I just saw what I read. He definitely seems like he's more on the left side of things. He's an open borders advocate. He believes in, the Abrego Garcia story. He believes in children in cages, which means that he's getting his news sources from CNN and ABC and NBC and CBS and MSLSD and all the rest. But not everybody in the Provost family is a left-wing radical lunatic. Case in point, his brother. His brother is MAGA to the millionth degree, okay? Leftists are in a complete meltdown after Pope's brother shared a video calling Nancy Pelosi a drunk, well, it starts with a C, it ends with a T, and I'll just say, see you next Tuesday, you can fill in the rest, and mocks crying liberals with Trump derangement syndrome. Far-left media outlets and their allies in the Democrat Party are in full panic mode after it's been revealed that Lou Provost, the straight-shooting Florida brother of the newly elected American Pope Leo XIV, isn't just a Catholic, he's unapologetically MAGA. Provost, a Port Charlotte, Florida native, proudly lives his life like many forgotten Americans, with faith, freedom, and the First Amendment. But now, after his younger brother ascended to the papacy of Pope Leo XIV, the leftist media mob is frantically digging through Lou's Facebook pages, looking for anything to, quote, cancel him over, and they think they found gold. What they found instead was a red-blooded American patriot telling it like it is, and it's absolutely glorious. Lou Provost shared a video of a liberal support group for their suffering from, quote, Trump derangement syndrome with the caption, "For my upset, crying, and left-leaning friends and others suffering from TDS, this service seems right for you." And then there's a video. On April 4th, Provost reposted a video of a younger Pelosi arguing for tariffs on China, exposing the radical 180-degree flip-flop that Nancy Pelosi and her Democrat cronies have pulled to appease their globalist warlords. The original post didn't hold back either. These effing liberals crying about tariffs is just unreal. Do they know that there is a thing called video? Just listen to what this drunk C-word has to say in the mid-90s, long before her husband had Grindr dates. This guy's awesome. Okay? He is awesome. Then it goes on to say, let's see, was there any more? Obama and the Democrats, they absolutely suck. They're one very small step from being full-blown communists. No, they're not one step. They are full-blown communists. Longing for the total destruction of our way of life and turning this country into a dictatorship, and a racist one on top of it. Meanwhile, the younger brother, Pope Leo XIV, participated in the Republican primaries. The Will County Clerk's office sent PolitiFact Prevost's voter information, which lists his party affiliation as undeclared. I'll get to this one in a second. It shows that he voted in the 2012, 2014, 2016 Republican primaries. He voted absentee in the 2024 general election with an undeclared party affiliation. Gee, why is he going undeclared and not Republican? I think it's pretty easy to figure that one out. Same reason I'm a registered independent. Because I want my vote to count. And so many of these election officials say, oh, R, or post office people, oh, there's an R on this one? In the garbage, right? So he's doing undeclared because this guy knows what's going on, okay? He gets it, 100%. And then it says, it's unclear how L2 determines a political affiliation. I'm sorry. The viral screenshots Kirk and others shared on X from L2, a paywalled database that aggregates consumers and voter data. L2's profile of Provost lists Republican in its party field, even though he hasn't been associated with any party. It's unclear how L2 determined a party affiliation for people who live in states such as Illinois, where their information is not included in voter registration. L2 did not respond to PolitiFact's request for comment. Despite his participation in Republican primaries, Pope Leo XIV has publicly criticized certain policies of the Trump administration, particularly on immigration. So there you go. So there is possibly some hope for this Pope. We'll have to see. Maybe his brother and him are close, and maybe his brother can speak some sense into him and turn this Pope, maybe, dare I say, Maga. We'll see. Okay, so there's been a lot of talk about this, all right? I don't know if you've seen the video. Obviously, I don't have the ability to show it to you, but I will include it in the Substack video. Here's what's interesting. I thought that you could just take a link and put it in Substack and it would just put the link. No, it actually populates the entire video, which is really cool because that means I can do the actual show. And then if there's a video like in tonight's show that I want you to see, I can just place it in the description and you can see what we're talking about. But you probably have already heard about this infamous train ride, right? An Englishman, a German, and a Frenchman get together on a train, and what's there going to be? Cocaine? Well, possibly. If you watch the video, they're all talking, they're sitting around this table, and there is a white thing next to Macron. And he notices it, and he takes it, and he puts it away with his hand, and then he doesn't think the camera's on him, and he slowly pulls his arm back and puts it in his pocket. Not to be undone by the Chancellor of Germany, Merz, who literally has what looks like a spoon on the table. And then he puts his hand over the spoon. So, I don't know. They're saying it was only a tissue and there's no cocaine and this and that. I don't know. This seems very odd and very strange. So I'll put the video in the show. You can see it for yourself. You determine what you think it is as well. Now, one more thing and then we're going to head out. So, okay, in every single election, when the incumbent wins the presidency, doesn't matter what party it is, typically 2 years later, that party that is no longer in power, it's almost a given that they win the midterms in the first term of a new president, okay? Now, President Trump has been able to do much better with Senate seats and things like that, but even he lost 40 seats in it was 2018. And then Biden also lost seats as well. But those two didn't lose nearly as many seats as Clinton lost, as Obama got smoked with 63 seats. So many others, George W. Bush lost like 38 seats. So there's a history. Even Reagan lost seats. So there's a history of that happening. But President Trump wants to defy history. And that's why 100 days into his second presidency, technically his third presidency, 18 months from now is when the midterms are. And guess what? He's already working on figuring out ways to defy history and make sure that Republicans keep the House and even increase their numbers in the Senate. Can it be done? Yes, it can. Especially if we're doing good, the country's doing great financially, and I don't know, perhaps maybe $5,000 of a Doge stipend is handed out a couple of weeks before the election, like I've been talking about. I don't know, maybe shutting down the IRS before the midterms and opening up the External Revenue Service. What are Democrats going to do? They're going to run on bring us back in power and we'll bring back the IRS and raise your taxes? So I think there's a generational opportunity for permanent change. We're talking 40, 50 years worth of change. If the damn Republicans can get their head out of their ass and start enacting legislation to codify all of these great things that President Trump is working on. So this is a Politico article, and it's titled, "Trump is Obsessed with His Last Campaign, the Midterms. 18 months out, the president is already hyper-engaged in the fight to keep the GOP's majorities in Congress." So I'll go through this. It's not too long. I'm not going to read the whole thing, just some of it. Early in Donald Trump's first term, the president received what he now views as terrible advice. "Don't worry about the midterm," some of his advisors told him back then. "They'll figure themselves out." If Democrats won majorities in 2018, their thinking went, it would only help him politically, giving him a political foil down Pennsylvania Avenue, an opportunity to triangulate in a gridlocked Washington ahead of a tough re-election a la Bill Clinton. That failed way of thinking did not pan out. Trump's agenda ground to a halt as he instead had to deal with 2 years of non-stop investigations and impeachments and all the other bullshit that went along with it. This time, President Trump is listening to his own advice and not listening to other people's advice. He doesn't want a mushy moderate, and he doesn't want Democrats running the House trying to impeach him. He has learned his lesson. Not even 3 months into his second term, the president is already hyper-focused and engaged in the fight to keep the GOP's majorities in Congress and expanding them. Far from writing off the House or the Senate, he is bullish about defying history and keeping Democrats away from committee gavels and their subpoena powers, according to 5 Republicans who spoke with condition of anonymity. He's rolling out early endorsements in hopes of forestalling messy primary fights that could divert precious resources from the general election campaigns. He's making recruitment calls already, and he is buttonholing other Republicans about how he can best use his political muscle. And he's continuing to raise boatloads of money that he will be happily shelling out in 2026. Trump's midterm obsession is also hovering over Capitol Hill as GOP lawmakers try to write his sprawling domestic policy agenda into law. On issue after issue, President Trump appears to sympathize with swing district moderates, the majority makers whose races will decide the majority. Trump and his aides have pushed back on steep cuts to Medicaid, in parts because of the politics of it. They've given a wide berth to blue state Republicans who are pushing to raise the cap on the deduction for the state and local taxes, a policy Trump signed into law in 2017 that helped sink him in suburban districts a year later. Now, he is not doing that. As a matter of fact, he's already backed off of raising taxes on the highest and wealthiest of Americans. Then he says, a lot of people say we only have 2 years. But why do we only have 2 years? We should have 4 years. That's what he said. One Trump advisor also said that we reject the defeatist attitude of operating from a perspective that we only have 2 years and not 4 years. Part of Trump's midterm infatuation, of course, is his love of the game of politics. He loves to read polls, he loves making endorsements, he loves doing speeches, he loves doing rallies, he loves playing kingmaker and otherwise moving pieces around on the political chessboard. He ticks off a win-loss record in his congressional races that he endorses, and he loves to go deep on the details of his own campaign. But Trump is also deeply motivated by his desire to avoid suffering through dozens of new investigations and a potential third impeachment if Democrats get a hold of the gavel. He knows what happens if we lose the House, added the advisor, noting that there's already several impeachment resolutions filed in the chamber. Historically, of course, even the best of kingmakers of political comebacks, such as the president, would seem to have the odds stacked against him, particularly in the House of Representatives, where parties in trifecta governments have tended to lose dozens of seats during the midterms of the modern era. Trump's GOP himself lost 40 seats in 2018. Then Trump says, for some reason, the president, whoever the president may be, whichever party it may be, the midterms are always tough. Trump himself mused at an NRCC dinner late last month. Why should they be tough? If we're doing great, they should be easy. And you know what? He's right. And I agree with that assessment. There's a little bit more to it, but you get the idea. So he's seriously hyper-focused on the midterms. One thing he needs to do is, instead of endorsing two candidates in Arizona, step up to the plate, get rid of Robeson, and go full bore 100% for Andy Biggs. You know, you want to be brave, you want to be bold, go with the real conservative and the only conservative in the race. But it's good to know that he is trying to defy history one more time. Those are my thoughts. What are yours? Put them down in the comments below. We'll see you in the next one.